Hello, 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 and welcome back. We'll just give you all a minute to filter in or filter back in if you are joining us again. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Sandy Lowe. I'm Bold Stroke Senior Editor, and I am here with these lovely authors who all have books coming out in just over a week in July. It's amazing. All right, as usual, I do need a second to set up our Facebook Live. So my question for our panel is, what's something unique in this book that you have never written before? And I'm going to start with Casey Richardson.
I think my book, Seasons for Change, takes place in Lake Tahoe, the west shore of Lake Tahoe. And Lake Tahoe is where I grew up. So it was special for me to write that setting and be able to give it the authenticity that it deserves.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I love it when you can write about places that are particularly important to you. It also makes it easier to write too, because you've been there and you know it so well. Yeah. Jackie, how about you? What's something unique in this book that you've never written before?
I don't typically write contemporary romance. It's not my jam usually. I like more of thrillers and supernatural and stuff like that. But this is a contemporary romance, which is different for me. I've never written about celebrities before, which is different for me. And then one of the main plot points in it is about addiction. And I have steered clear of that subject in the past, and I didn't this time. So it was interesting to tackle.
That's interesting. Cool. Julie, how about you? Something different you've never written before?
This book has 3 separate stories in it. It's a trilogy, and they're all 3 separate, but they're also interrelated. So I had to write almost like 3 standalones, albeit a whole lot shorter, thank goodness. And so that's what made it a challenge. Did I say that in this story versus in this story, or am I thinking about it for the next one? So it's the first time I've tried something like this, and it was harder than I thought it was going to be.
Interesting. And Jean, what about you? Something you've never written before?
Well, in Poison Pen, my main character is a writer. She's a lesbian fiction writer. And it centers around a terrible review of her debut novel. And so I kind of had fun delving into the mindset of a writer when they read that first terrible review. And I've never gotten that close to, actually making the character a writer like that, and then kind of, channeling those thoughts. But it's done from a humorous point of view. And it is contemporary romance, but I did put that element in there just to give it a try.
Sure, I love that. I know lots of authors who know all about that, so you don't have to go far for your research. Awesome. All right, so this is a reading panel, and these guys are reading from their July releases. All right, Jenny Frame cannot be with us tonight, but has recorded a reading. So we are going to start with Jenny, and I will share my screen.
Hi there, it's nice to be with you. Today I'm going to read from Home is Where the Heart Is, and that's a sequel to the first book in the series of The Duchess and the Dreamer. So I hope you'll enjoy it. The cool early evening breeze flew across Rosebrook Beach. It was a welcome change for Aisling O'Rourke after enduring an exceptionally hot June day. After a hot, busy day in Rosebrook Trust office, Ash routinely came down to read a book on the beach. She always brought her deck chair up to the water's edge, so the water would lap at her feet while she read. Ash was a few pages from the end of her favourite romance novel, The Dastardly Duke. Despite having read the book countless times, Ash's breathing grew short. Her heart pounded, and she dug her toes into the cold, wet sand beneath her feet. In anticipation of the final declaration of love, Ash was never bored of her favourite books. In fact, rereading them over and over gave her a safe, relaxed feeling. Even though there may be angst throughout the story, she knew for certain it would all be all right in the end. She loved fairy tale and Regency romance novels, and any downtime Ash had in the day was spent reading her beloved books. Her love of romance fiction and her large collection of books had been passed down to her from her mother, Kate. When Ash reached the marriage proposal on the last page, she was reminded of how she and her mum talked about that scene every time one of them read it. She looked up from the paperback and watched the gentle waves roll into shore. She could hear her mum's voice as they talked giddily over their favourite book. She was sure that's why these books were so important to her. They and her memories were all she had of her mum now, but they also allowed her to escape. The small village of Rosebrook was dying by the time she was born, and so books, and especially romance novels, became her escape from the dull world she was living in. Ash's books gave her the only chance to experience the excitement of love in all its forms. Because here in Rosebrook, still living with her dad, books were the only excitement she got. She gazed back to the page and smiled. This was her favourite part, and she knew it by heart. Ash brought the book close to her chest and closed her eyes, and recited those final words of the love story. The dastardly Duke thought his heart was impenetrable, but that was until the obstinate Diana Carleton came along, and his heart had been pierced by Cupid's arrow. All that had seemed important, like the glamorous London parties, the many women he pursued and seduced, gambling at the cards table, and travelling all over the world, were now so unimportant. All that mattered was making a home for Diana at Glassford Castle, and spending forever loving her. The dastardly Duke was now the deeply loving Duke, and all because of the power of love. Ash let out a sigh of happiness and opened her eyes. If you couldn't experience real love, then living vicariously through your favourite fictional characters was the next best thing. And where better to read about them than on the beach in the cove below the village? She didn't think there was any beach in the world that came close to Rosebrook's unspoiled beach. As long as the weather was fine, which it had been this summer, Rosebrook Beach hadn't been a tourist trap for a long, long time. Her grandma used to tell her about the flock of visitors they got every spring and summer, who brought much needed revenue to the village. Ash looked to her left and saw her father's small fishing boat sailing towards the wooden pier at the end of the beach. She got up and folded up her deck chair. The breeze gusted and blew her straw sun hat off her head. Ash picked it up, then brushed her hair behind her ears. She'd said she'd meet her dad after he came in from his afternoon booking, so she lifted her deck chair and carried it up to the beach huts that ran along the sheer cliff face at the back of the beach. The huts were among the many improvements since Evan Fox had come to their village. The CEO of Fox Toys and an avid environmentalist, Evan Fox, had come to Rosebrook determined to revitalise the village she and her parents had visited as a child. Evan bounced in full energy and sold the villagers on her vision to build a new kind of village, an ecological village where they made the environment and saving it their top priority. Bringing back the Victorian-style beach huts was one of the many things that Ash loved. She opened the door and placed her deck chair in, then locked the hut up and began walking along the beach towards the boat shop, holding her shoes in her hands. Walking on the cool sand was a heavenly way to end the day. It's been lovely reading for you today, and I hope I will speak to you again soon. Cheers.
Awesome. I love Jenny. So that is Home is Where the Heart Is by Jenny Frame. Alrighty, we are going to stick with our book theme and start with Jean Copeland, who is reading from her book, Poison Pen. If everyone else can stop their video and mute, Jean, go ahead and start reading whenever you're ready.
Okay, in this scene, Kendra Blake is at a dance with her friends celebrating after finishing her debut novel. She happens to catch the eye of a younger woman who instantly makes her start rethinking her single life. And I'm going to attempt a British accent here, so hold your applause till the end. Kendra stepped to the edge of the dance floor and noticed Allison dancing with Violet. That was fast. A twinge of regret crawled under her skin. Had she missed a chance at something she hadn't known she wanted? She turned and headed toward the exit. Before she'd reached the foyer, someone tapped her shoulder. When she turned around, she was dazzled by the young woman's smile. "You ain't going to pull an Irish goodbye then, were you?" What? Was that a British accent? Kendra fell immediately in love with her voice. "My friends knew I was on my way out," Kendra said in a half giggle. "I wanted to thank you for the drink, but I didn't want to cut in on you and Violet." "That's your friend? Well, she's quite a good dancer." "Yeah, she is." "I bet you've got some moves yourself then, haven't you?" Kendra tried not to swoon over the accent, but she was failing. "How old are you?" The woman seemed to wince at the terse question. "Old enough to be here." "I know that," Kendra said. "I was just curious." "And why might you be curious about that?" Allison was so making use of those long mascara eyelashes. Kendra pretended to survey the crowd. "Just making conversation." "Well then, let's start with names. I'm Allison." She extended a hand. "Kendra," she replied as she slipped her hand into Allison's. "Pleasure to meet you, Kendra." She cocked her head to the side. "I noticed you were here with others, but I'm leaving alone. Is it because you've got someone waiting at home?" "If I did, I wouldn't be letting you flirt with me." Kendra surprised herself with that retort. That definitely wasn't like her. She might have been done with her novel, but her love of creating flirty character dialogue seemed to be on autopilot. "Okay, you got me. I was flirting. A little." "Fine job," Kendra replied, and avoided eye contact again by glancing around. Apparently, she was good for only one quality comeback per scene. "Any chance you might stay on for one more drink?" Kendra shrugged. Actually, she suddenly wasn't in such a rush to leave, but she wasn't going to let Allison know that. "Oh, come on. Maybe I can help you meet someone. See anyone here you like?" "I don't know," Kendra said shyly. She couldn't help grinning at the quirky approach. Allison studied her, almost boring into her soul with her eyes. "The place is mobbed. Isn't there anyone here you fancy?" Kendra shook her head, willing her face to appear indifferent. "You can't be serious. There's nobody here that you fancy?" Under pressure, Kendra pointed to a middle-aged brunette who happened to be walking away from the bar. "Maybe her?" "Her? She looks just like you. What are you, some sort of narcissist?" Kendra took a step back. This conversation was getting away from her. No, but I'm not looking for anyone at the moment." Allison's frown screamed pity. "Oh, just out of a horrid affair then?" "No, actually, my last relationship ended pretty amicably a few years ago." Kendra was usually good at reading people's expressions, but Allison appeared perplexed. "So it just ended?" Allison's eyebrows crinkled as she seemed to puzzle it out. "You decided it wasn't working anymore and then off you went?" "No, we made the decision together and she moved out." "Fascinating," Allison said. "I wasn't aware relationships could end without heaps of drama." Intrigued, Kendra attempted to do the mental math. "Where did you say you're from?" "Well, I didn't say, but I'm from the UK. Milton Keynes, to be precise." "Cool. So yeah, I try to do everything in my life drama-free. I'm too old for games and insincere people." "Well, I say you're not too old for anything, but it's refreshing to meet someone who's anti-drama. I'd rather like to text you sometime if that'd be all right." Allison's face melted into a warm smile. She stared expectantly. "Well, it's a yes or no question, but please don't feel obligated. It was lovely to meet you." "No, wait," Kendra said as Allison turned to leave. Yeah, sure you can have my number." I promise I won't post it on the bathroom wall. Kendra glanced at her in amusement as she entered her digits into Allison's phone. Good night, Miss Kendra. Allison's hand lingered on hers as she took her phone back. Good night. They stood for an extended moment, neither seeming willing to break eye contact first. When Kendra's teeth started going dry from smiling so long, she snapped out of it. Walking to her car, she thought about that random encounter. Allison was obviously too young for her, but she certainly was intriguing. She studied her eyes in her rearview mirror. Things were changing in her professional life. Why not in her romantic world, too?
Awesome. You killed that accent. I'm so impressed. I absolutely could not have done that. So definitely got applause over here. That was great.
Thanks.
So quick question for you. How much of this book is based on your experience as a writer, and how much did you make up?
It's a lot of it was my experience as a writer, especially like the excitement and the superstition of the first novel coming out. And then also that, like, you're so hyped up for that first review, and then when you get that one that's negative, it's like, you just like deflate like one of those, like, used car lot dummies. And then also the character of Allison is actually based on my British friend Allison, who for years had been saying, when are you going to write a book about me? So I finally answered her.
That's awesome. I love it. All righty. Next up, we have Casey Richardson, who is reading from her new romance, Seasons for Change. Casey, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your book, and you can start reading whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, I'm Casey Richardson, and I am reading from my book, Seasons for Change. It's a contemporary romance novel between Morgan Campbell and Sean Evans. And Sean is a diner owner in the west shore of Lake Tahoe, and Morgan goes through a bad breakup and goes to Tahoe for some self-discovery. And so I am reading a passage that where Sean and Morgan meet for the first time. Now Morgan's up in Tahoe for a 3-day holiday with her best friends. Her girlfriend was supposed to have come with them, but she canceled at the last minute. And they're going to Sean's diner for breakfast. Morgan sat in the back seat and marveled at all the tall pine trees that inhabited the area. Farther down the road from their cabin, the lake came into view, and Morgan gasped. You okay back there? Annie asked as she turned her head toward the back seat. Yes, but I'm always amazed by the beauty of the lake. You've been here before, though. Morgan thought about her occasional trips with Jessica to Lake Tahoe, but this one was different. Yes, but we always go to the South Shore so Jess can gamble, and we usually end up staying at a casino. It's so crowded near State Line, so it's not like this area. Morgan was trying to find the words to describe it. She felt serene, at peace with the scarcity of the houses and cabins. There was so much space. So tell me about this restaurant we're going to. Jane put her left blinker on and turned into a smallish driveway. No time, we're here. They got out of the car to the sound of rushing water. The Truckee River was a stone's throw away from where they stood. Annie threw her arms around Morgan and gave her a tiny squeeze. Want to go river rafting? Morgan ducked out from under Annie's hold and turned away. Oh no, you're not getting me on a raft. Jane laughed as she held the door open for Morgan and Annie. The diner was packed and people stood waiting to be seated. Morgan was impressed with the eatery. The entire front of it had floor-to-ceiling windows giving every diner a partially tree-obstructed view of the lake. Good morning, welcome to Ray's Diner. How many? Morgan felt her mouth go dry when she heard the deep timbre of the voice that belonged to the butch behind the register. She smiled at Morgan as she waited for her answer. 3 of us. How long is the wait? Jane took over since Morgan's voice seemed to be gone. Just about 20 minutes. I promise it'll be worth it. She smiled as she looked at Morgan. I just bet it would. Great. Is it okay if we wait outside? Sure. Can I get a name? Annie nudged Morgan and she faltered forward. Morgan. Hi, Morgan, I'm Sean. I'll come get you when your table's ready. Annie grabbed Morgan's arm and pulled her outside to Jane's laughter. Morgan was feeling suddenly warm and she felt the heat flash to her face. She also felt a little lightheaded, but that could have been from the altitude. Morgan accepted that reasoning. Oh my God, did I just do that? Morgan grabbed Annie's arms and she felt her eyes bulge. Please tell me I just did not do that. Tell me I didn't go speechless and make a total ass of myself. Annie and Jane were laughing hard enough to bring tears to their eyes. Morgan, sweetie, you have drool on your chin, Jane said, which made them laugh harder and made Morgan want to jump in the deepest hole she could find. She covered her face with her hands and shook her head, feeling the heat on her face. No, 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 we can't go back in there. Jane, tell her we changed our minds. Jane continued to laugh. Not a chance. I've never seen you behave that way. Normally you're cool as a cucumber, but she sure did a number on you. I can't believe I behaved that way. I have a girlfriend, for Christ's sake. Yes, who should be here with you right now. Morgan didn't miss the irritation in Jane's voice. Look, I already know you don't like her, but she is my girlfriend. Jane hugged Morgan and she slowly relaxed into her arms. I'm sorry, but you're my best friend and I just don't think she deserves you. Now we're here for a long weekend and I really want us to have a great time. Morgan gave Jane one more squeeze and stepped back. I want that too. The door to the diner opened and a large group exited and walked toward the river. A few minutes later, Sean opened the door and smiled at them. Morgan, your table's ready. They followed Sean to the table, Morgan finding it difficult to keep her eyes off Sean's backside. Sean held the chair out for Morgan. Just that tiny move made Morgan feel giddy, and she thanked her. Sean handed them their menus and told them their server would be right with them. As Sean headed back to the register, Morgan felt her gaze lingering once again on Sean's ass that filled out her jeans in the best possible way. She caught Annie and Jane staring at her, and she used the menu to fan herself. Annie and Jane laughed, and Morgan joined them. Just because I'm taken doesn't mean I'm dead. That is one good-looking woman right there. Throughout the meal, Morgan stole quick glances of Sean. She always had a smile on her face when she interacted with the customers. She even gave a few hugs as the patrons left. She liked Sean's style and easygoing interaction with people. Once they'd finished breakfast, they sat back in their chairs and collectively sighed. Annie picked up the check the server had dropped off at the table and they walked to the register. So how was everything? Sean asked as she rang up the charges. Well, I think I can speak for all of us that this was probably the best breakfast we've ever had. Morgan stood off to the side, content to let Jane do all the talking, and observed the diner owner who she found attractive. She usually wasn't so shy, but she just couldn't come up with any words for the woman behind the register that wouldn't make her sound like a schoolgirl, which was exactly how she felt when Sean smiled at her. Sean was dressed in a plain black t-shirt and light blue jeans. Her tan skin covered well-toned muscles had Morgan thinking all kinds of nasty thoughts. Morgan's fingers itched to run through Sean's dark, short, thick hair, and Morgan could see Sean had been living a great life as evidenced by the laugh lines around her eyes. How about you, Morgan? Did you enjoy your oatmeal? The hopeful look on Sean's face urged Morgan to not let her down. It was delicious. I'd love to eat here again. Jesus, could Morgan sound more juvenile? However, the look of satisfaction on Sean's face pleased Morgan, and she wished that she could see that look on Jess's face once in a while. So, are you ladies here for vacation? I don't recall seeing you before. Morgan continued to stare, but she found the courage to finally answer. Yes, here for the holiday weekend. Sean looked Morgan up and down, and she felt like she was being undressed with Sean's eyes. Too bad. Sean looked disappointed, and Morgan wondered what that was about. Thanks for coming in, ladies. I hope you have a great stay. They left the diner, and Morgan felt like she could finally breathe again. Morgan has a girlfriend, Annie sang. Shut it, Annie. They all laughed again as they meandered their way into town to do some shopping. Morgan wondered what the next few days would hold and if she'd see Sean again. Not that she would do anything. She wasn't a cheater and she wouldn't start now. Still, it was fun to have a little fantasy.
Oh my gosh. I feel like only you could turn oatmeal into an innuendo. Was it supposed to be an innuendo or did I just read it like that? I don't know, but that was awesome. I love the interaction between the friends too. I think that's really cool. Something that's always so special in books. And in the intro, you're talking about how the setting is really special in this book too. So what role does this group of friends play in this story?
So there's some really great secondary characters in this book. So Jane and Annie are Morgan's best friends, and later on they're pretty much the kicker of Morgan's ass. You know, whenever she starts acting like a fool, they're there to rein her in. Later on in the book, Sean's grandfather had passed away and left her the diner, and his 4 best friends still are like Sean's surrogate grandfathers, and those 4 old guys are a hoot. So I really love the interaction with them and with that they have with Sean and with Morgan when she gets introduced to them.
That's awesome. Well, I love it. I think you totally pulled it off, and I would have said the same thing, that friends are there when you need it, right? Alrighty, next up we have Jackie D, who is reading from her contemporary romance VIP, something I'm sure she knows a lot about. So Jackie, why don't you introduce yourself, your book, and you can start reading whenever you're ready.
Okay, so this book is a contemporary romance. It is about a incredibly famous pop singer and a very famous actress, and their lives in Los Angeles and in the business, and how family plays a role and the media plays a role, and secrets and lies kept by family members. So the scene setting up, the first part of the chapter, they're about to go to, they're both going to be at the same party, but they don't know that yet, because Harlow Thorne has a song coming out on Audrey Knox's newest movie. So we're in Harlow's point of view for this section. Harlow closed her eyes as her fingers glided along the piano keys. People moved around her, faces she wouldn't remember tomorrow. Carts full of dinner and glassware clanged together as they passed by. Voices of men and women shouted out orders over noisy employees who prepared for the coming event. Harlow didn't hear any of it. All she could hear was the melody that had started to take shape in her mind. She wasn't sure what it would transform into, but she loved it already. That's how it usually happened. A thought would become a lyric, a sound would become a beat, and inspiration would become a tone. It would usually occur when she least expected it, and because of that, she never turned it off. Music was as much a part of her as her eye color. It coursed through her veins and hid in every strand of DNA. Casper sat down next to her. New song? She let her head sway, the beginning of one. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Casper looked handsome in his suit jacket and white V-neck shirt. His blonde, messy hair was intentionally casual. His blue eyes sparkled with excitement, and she couldn't help but put her head on his shoulder. You look very dashing tonight, she elbowed him in the side. He squeezed her. You can't be the only heartbreaker in the family. He leaned back, his expression serious. Have you decided on a second night in Dallas? I sent you over the information 3 days ago. Casper, you know I don't care. Just tell me where to show up and I'll be there. Harlow put her fingers back on the piano keys. Okay, I'll get it all worked out. I know, she smiled. Casper handled the details, and he always had. It would be too much to manage on her own, and he was the only person she trusted. He knew her likes and dislikes. He knew how much she could handle regarding turnaround times, and he was cognizant of making sure she had ample rest. Hell, sometimes she wondered if he knew her better than she knew herself. It was entirely possible. He glanced at his watch. The party starts in an hour. I need you to do some press before. Harlow tilted her head, trying to decide if G flat or G sharp worked better. I'll be there, just 5 more minutes. Casper walked away without argument because he knew she wouldn't be late. She might be unpredictable at times, but she was always a professional. She hit the keys a few more times and smiled. G sharp. Press questions were always the same. Harlow spent an hour rambling off the same answers in 100 different ways. Yes, she was thrilled about the album. Yes, the tour was going to feature her new and old songs. No, she wasn't dating anyone. Yes, having her songs in a summer blockbuster was thrilling. Although, to be fair, this was the first time her songs had ever graced the silver screen, so she let the annoyance over that one slide. She was on the verge of losing her mind when Casper thanked the press and promised them more soon. Time for pictures with the cast. Took you long enough, she elbowed him on the way down from the small press stage. You know I like watching your eyes glaze over with boredom. She was in the process of formulating a response when she caught a glimpse of Audrey Knox entering the room. Audrey wasn't just beautiful. That word wouldn't do her justice. She was elegant, poised, and had an aura about her that made her seem just out of Harlow's grasp. When people in the industry talked about someone having the it factor, they meant Audrey Knox. Don't even think about it, Casper whispered against her ear. Think about it. Hell, she'd been dreaming about it since she was 16 years old. Harlow wasn't one for crushes. That wasn't her style. But she'd always made an exception for Audrey Knox. Relax, Casper. You're always telling me I need friends. She gave him a wicked smile. Friends, yes. People to watch movies with. People to drink Cosmos with and laugh at failed relationships. People who could literally stop traffic in that dress. She could probably do it in jeans too. She tried to say it in a joking tone, but Casper knew her better than that. Casper sighed, but she stopped listening to anything he had to say. She couldn't take her eyes off Audrey, who moved from person to person, kissing their cheeks, hugging them hello. When she spoke to them, she seemed solely focused. It appeared she possessed that rare quality of making people feel like they were the only ones in her orbit for that passing moment. Audrey stepped in front of her and put her hand out. I'm Audrey Knox. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Harlow may have been a daze of lust, but she was far too smooth to let it show. Harlow Thorne, and I assure you the pleasure is entirely mine. Audrey tilted her head slightly to the side. She seemed as though she were making her mind up about something, and Harlow wished she possessed the power of telepathy. I love the songs you made for the movie. You seem to have really connected with the characters. Well, I truly enjoyed doing it. Harlow took a step closer. If you'd like, we can get together later and I can show you which songs didn't make the final cut. Audrey stared at her with so much intensity, it could only mean she'd take her up on her offer or place her on a mental list of absolute fucking weirdos. Audrey parted her lips to answer, and Harlow felt her pulse quicken. She was close enough to smell the light perfume Audrey wore. Her golden hair sat on her shoulders as if it knew the exact part it needed to play to accentuate her features. Audrey's eyes left hers for the first time since they started speaking. The flecks of gold seemed more pronounced against the blue once she shifted her head. I have to go, I'm sorry, Audrey said as she turned and headed the other direction. Harlow looked around, wondering what could have possibly caused the sudden shift, but nothing seemed out of place. She looked back, trying to see where Audrey had gone, but she'd already disappeared into a sea of people. Shit, she mumbled under her breath. A music producer grabbed her arm and flung Harlow back into an evening of small talk and fake smiles. Harlow tried to force herself to listen to what he was saying. Granted, it was nothing of consequence. Even in the best of circumstances, this type of conversation would send her screaming for the hills. But she couldn't shake the feeling she had when Audrey made eye contact. That slight glimmer in her eyes had given away an inkling of interest. Harlow was well aware when people found her attractive, and she'd seen it when Audrey looked at her. Even if it only been for a split second, it was there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. It's the See the Gorgeous Woman Across the Room night here on BSB. I love it. That was great. So you mentioned in the intro that you have never written celebrities before, but your reading was great, and I wouldn't have known that if you hadn't told me. So what kind of research did you do to kind of make it feel so real?
I like the genre, so I've read lots of books in it. I've read Fiona Riley's Media Darling, playing the role of herself. I can't think of their names off the top of my head right now. And then they are Audrey and Harlow. Their achievements are based on actual people. Audrey's achievements at her age are the same ones as that Reese Witherspoon had accomplished. And then I'm sure it will surprise no one that Harlow's are the same as Taylor Swift's. So that's kind of the baseline for it. Just, I wanted to write two women that were already exceptional on their own and didn't need each other to be special. They were already that, but they found something even better with each other. So I wanted it to be a little bit different. And then Harlow, of course, has a twin brother, Casper, which made an appearance in this one that has a huge effect on her life and her upbringing and kind of where she's headed.
Awesome. Well, I feel like you just sold 1 million copies with the Reese Witherspoon, Taylor Swift romance. So
that's the only, it's not based on Reese.
And
Just
those,
drop those names, Jackie.
It's not, it's not a fan fiction about them. Just let me, let me clarify that.
awesome. All righty. Next up, we have Julie Cannon, who is reading from her July release, Summer Lovin'. Julie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and start reading whenever you like.
Certainly. So this is the cover. So I love it. It's got three sets of legs on it, which I think is fabulous. And as I said in the beginning, this is 3 stories of fun in the sun in one unforgettable summer. And there's 3 of the stories. One of them is called Maui Magic, and obviously it's set in Maui. The other one is Bahama Breeze and is set in Nassau in the Bahamas. And the other one is Jamaica Haven. And there are Addison, Samantha, and Cora are 3 executives of a construction company, and they're each spending a month of their time volunteering with an agency of their choice. And there's no rules about where they can go or what they can do, but it has to be something that where they as individuals can make a significant impact, and the company is funding some projects in that area where they can make an impact as well. So the CEO of the company, Addison, she told the other 2 characters that pick a place, an exotic location, because they have been working really hard, because even paradise has its needy. So it gives you a combination to mix a little bit of relaxation and volunteer work. And of course, it wouldn't be, this wouldn't be a romance without, well, some romance in it. So I'm going to read the prologue, which kind of sets it all up, because I was thinking about, okay, which of these excerpts of these 3 stories do I want to read? And I decided I'll just set it all up, and we'll just we'll go from there. So, all right, ladies, what have you decided? Addison Bradbury looked at the 2 women sitting around the table at the far end of the office. I'll start. Cora Donaldson, the head of purchasing, spoke first. She'd been at Bradbury Construction for 7 years, one of the first people Addison hired when she took the reign of her father's company. Cora wasn't quite 5 feet tall and had an unusual combination of piercing blue eyes and red hair. She was generally quiet, and unless she was with people she was familiar with, she rarely started a conversation. She was 38, single, and Addison had recently discovered wrote fan fiction. She never brought a +1 to a company event or ever said anything about a we when recalling what she'd done on her weekend or on her vacation. I'm headed to an animal shelter called Haven. It's a full cycle shelter in Jamaica. What's a full cycle shelter? Samantha Recker asked. She was the chief financial officer who held the purse strings for what they were about to discuss. They rescue dogs and cats, and they give them whatever medical treatment they need, and they find them new homes. There's thousands of them on the island. The founder is sometimes out for days trying to trap a stray animal, and she'll stop anywhere and anytime to catch an animal that she sees as a stray. Once she was heading to her wedding as the maid of honor, and she pulled over and rescued 12 puppies from a ditch. She was featured in a local magazine several years ago. And for the really skittish animals, she said, they have a halfway house to teach them how to be someone's pet. A halfway house? Addison asked, taking off her reading glasses. Yeah, some of the animals have been on their own for years, simply just trying to survive. They're afraid of everything, especially people. Everyday noises that we take for granted, like the microwave beeping or the shower running or even the toast popping up, is a threat to them. The halfway house teaches them not to be afraid of sounds found in a typical household. Once they're socialized, they're eligible to go to a new home. But I'll be in the shelter or out in the field or wherever they need an extra hand. Their funding, she turned to Samantha, thank you very much, will give them a new play yard, and we're planning on building more outdoor kennels. Addison nodded. Sounds like a great organization. She turned to Samantha. I was headed to the Maldives to set up a homeless shelter, but I was able to clear my schedule, so I'm leaving the day after tomorrow to go to the Bahamas, specifically Nassau, Samantha said. I'm going to work with United Aid to help clean up after Hurricane Eduardo. That was an awful storm, Addison commented. That was what, a week ago? The destruction was awful. Samantha nodded. Yeah, the people are proud and doing the best they can with little or no resources. Our funding will be a game changer. Samantha Recker lived up to her name, fancying fast motorcycles, hang gliding, and anything that caused her heart to race. Samantha was stunning and had somehow managed to evade being someone's wife. She stood almost 6 feet tall in her socks, and today she wore her long blonde hair up in a French braid. Her manicured fingernail tapped on the green folder in front of her. What about you, boss? Cora asked. I'm going to Maui. I'm working for Habitat for Humanity. We're funding a women's build for 3 families. All the work is done by women, except for a few special contractor. Every person on the build site is female, and we're able to fund the building of 3 houses this year, Addison said proudly. She was proud of the way her team had embraced the volunteer program she'd started 6 years ago. She had inherited the company the previous year when her father had dropped dead of a brain aneurysm on a job site. She'd been 29, and even though she'd spent almost 15 years working beside her dad, she was still terrified. Addison was a firm believer in giving back and would be forever grateful to those that had helped her and her family during the lean years when her father was building the business. When the financials of Bradbury Construction shifted from just being able to donate small cash contributions and volunteer days, she had proposed, let's do this, the volunteer event they were talking about now. All right, Addison said, closing her notebook and looking at the 2 women. Let's get back to work. That's it.
Awesome. That was great. I love let's do this as a volunteer event.
Let's do it. I mean, can you imagine what a company where your boss says, take a month off and go do some sort of volunteer work? What an awesome organization that would be.
Yeah, and if Radcliffe is listening to this, please do keep Julie Cannon.
That's right.
So Julie, you mentioned in the intro that writing this one was a little different, and you've written a whole bunch of novels and a bunch of novellas too. So what was it like to kind of merge the novel and the novella into one book? How was it different?
I think what was the most different was the story is so condensed. So instead of a typical novel being at a minimum 60,000 words, 60 to 70,000 words, this one was about 20 to 25,000. The overall length is still the same, but it's a condensed story. So you have to, instead of more backstory, more of their history, what makes them tick, scattered throughout the book, you've got to get it up front a little bit quicker to get people's attention, and then you've got to move on. The other thing that was challenging was, you know, it's a romance. There has to be happily ever after. And these are 3 women who are on different parts of the world for a finite period of time. And how do you figure out that happily ever after? Mm-hmm. So you got to read the book to find out.
For sure. Alrighty, so we have a panel of romance writers tonight, which is cool. So my question for our panel is, in your opinion, what is one thing, because there are going to be many, but what's one thing that you feel is really, really important in a romance novel? Like, you will be disappointed if it's not in one that you are reading. Who looks like they have an answer? Does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
I will. Sexy times. You need sexy times in a romance novel.
Okay, let's start there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and you know, they either have to be very like sex on the page, or there's so much sexual tension that you know that there's something's going to happen, and when it does, it's going to be something else. I think that chemistry, whether it be actual or just the chemistry or the dreams, like Casey said, is really important.
I know, like Jean, you write, sometimes write fade to black, but I feel like your chemistry is so on point that I don't feel like I'm really missing much, not having the actual sex scene. But so I think that's something that you do really well. Is there something you feel is most important in a romance?
Yeah, well, you are going to get sex in this one. Don't worry about it.
There you go.
Woohoo!
I agree with Julie that the flirtation and the chemistry and the building up to something is definitely something that I love to read and I love to write. So for sure, I'm gonna just steal Julie's answer.
Alrighty.
And and you absolutely positively have to have a happily ever after, because who wants to read a story where people, they're so emotionally involved and you're so emotionally involved and there's character, and then somebody dies at the end or they move away, and I've read some stories like that and it was just completely awful.
Yeah.
So the happily ever after, in some way, shape, or form has to be there.
Yeah, for sure. Jackie, how about you?
For me to really enjoy it, besides, I mean, obviously sex is important in romance novels, but it has to be really believable dialogue too. I don't enjoy it if I feel like it's forced or doesn't make sense from the characters, or and the same with secondary characters. I enjoy them sometimes just as much as I do the main characters, because I think getting to know their best friends and family adds a different layer to understanding the main characters, which if you're trying to understand them as people, I think those things are important too.
For sure. Awesome answers. So what do you hope that readers will take away after reading your novel? What do you hope that readers will feel? Maybe something you hope they'll think more about. What would you like readers to kind of gain from the experience of reading your novel?
I think I would say that they feel good. They feel uplifted. Maybe it's filled a place in their life, a void in their life that they might have in some way, shape, or form, and that they want to pick it up again. When times are tough, I want to feel good, so I'm going to read something that makes me feel good. I know when I read a romance, I go back to those early years when it was all tingly and they walked in the room and it took your breath away. And so it makes me go back and relive those days. And that's, to me, what keeps it interesting. That's what I hope that people would walk away from.
Awesome. I love that. Jean, how about you? What do you hope readers will gain from your book?
I always hope that readers will enjoy an escape, just a momentary escape, whether it's for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, just from, the everyday flow of life. And I hope that they'll laugh, and I hope that they'll be emotionally moved, because those are like my two favorite things. When I watch a movie, I want to laugh and I want to be emotionally moved. More so than anything else. So I hope that people enjoy my books as just a way to have just a fun escape from life for just a little bit.
Well, I love that. Jackie, how about you?
I mean, Julie and Jean are so upbeat and happy. And Jean, I can't get over seeing Charlotte's tail keep smacking you in the face. It's bringing me a lot of joy right now. But I think with this one, it was more of the common humanity of it, that even though both of these women come from one comes from a privileged background, both of them live in a world of privilege, but the addiction that takes place in one of the families, it tears it at the seams the same way it would for regular people. And it's just kind of the common thread of shared humanity that we all experience at times, and that no one's really above that, especially in a world where it's really easy to talk bad about people on social media or whatever and tear each other down, that there's some still common tragedies that link us as people, as well as, I mean, there's positive things that link us all together too, but this one focuses on a much more difficult concept. So just shared humanity.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting. I like how sometimes different books, the reader will come away with a different feeling or a different idea of the world, depending on what the book is. Casey, how about you? What do you hope readers will gain from your book?
I hope that they feel like they're on the journey with Morgan and Sean, and through my description of Lake Tahoe, that they feel like they're visiting there too. Because to me, it's, I haven't lived there for over 30 years, but it's still my home. And it's the place where I feel most peaceful. And I have never heard anybody who has visited Lake Tahoe said that they hated it. No one. No one can say that. So I hope that that I did the story justice, and the town justice, and the characters justice. And I just hope the readers enjoy the ride.
Cool. Well, I've never been, so I'm looking forward to reading all
You're missing out.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
You are missing out.
All right. Well, I'm going to read Casey's book and feel like I'm there. So, okay. Thank you all so much for joining us for BSB Preview June edition for our July releases. I'm going to pop that link in the chat room one last time. Please do check out all their books. They are 15% off if you pre-order within the next about 35 minutes. And they will be out for a general release on the BSB web store in just about 10 days. Thank you all so much. Thanks to our amazing authors for being here. Have a great night.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.